everyone, for this week's seminar, you'll be talking about or studying about mycology and virology. This is Joanna Season, your speaker for this week. So, here's the outline of our discussion. It will be divided into two parts, which is your mycology and your virology. And for mycology, we'll be talking about terms and concepts, its classification, as well as the laboratory diagnosis. For virology, we'll be talking about its terms and concepts, the DNA viruses, the RNA viruses, and of course, the laboratory diagnosis used in virology. Take note that I have given you a handout for this topic, so make sure that you have printed out or maybe secure a copy of it so that as you go along in this video, you have a copy para mabilis kayo makafollow sa discussion. And don't worry, this won't be a very formal discussion since kailangan chill lang tayo pag nagre-review. So without further ado, we'll start with your part 1, which is mycology. And also take note, the videos are divided into several parts para hindi tuloy-tuloy or nakaka-drain yung pakikinig nyo ng Myco Viro. And I know this subject is very boring. So memorize lang talaga tayo dito. And also take note, in the board subjects, or in the board exam rather, your mycology and virology only has a very small percentage to be out in the exam questions. But I think for 2021 board examinations, I think the virology part would be an important role, especially that we are under the pandemic, which is COVID-19, a virus. So before tayo mag-virus, we go to mycology. So first one, your mycology is simply the study of your fungi. Your singular form for fungi is fungus. Take note that your fungi is a eukaryote cell, meaning it has a true nuclei that digests food externally and absorbs nutrients directly through its cell walls. Now, it has several features. First one, it is considered as a sap probe, wherein they rely on decaying vegetation and plants for sources of nitrogen. And it's also described as a thallophytes, wherein thallo meaning true nuclei and then phytes is a plant-like, meaning they are plant-like organisms pero hindi talaga sila plants. Because, take note that plants are considered as prokaryote, meaning wala silang nuclei. But for fungi, they have a true nuclei. Now, you have your three phases of fungi. You have your mold phase, yeast phase, and your dimorphic phase. For mold phase, take note that it grows well at the temperature of 25 degrees Celsius. And it has 4 stages. First one, your hyphal growth. Second stage is the spore production. Third one is the spore formation. And lastly, the spread of the spores through spore germination. While for the yeast phase, it grows well at the temperature of 35 to 37 degrees Celsius. So notice this is usually in the human normal body temperature. So kaya sa mapapansin nyo, mas common yung pagkakaroon ng yeast infections sa humans kasi this is our normal body temperature. Next, aside from that, take note that your yeast resembles like a bacterial colony, as you can see on the pictures shown on the screen. So makikita nyo, pag nilagay siya sa agar plate, para siyang mga bacteria na creamy yung texture. But in fact, they are yeast. So compare natin yung cell ng bacteria and yung yeast. So makikita nyo, both of them have cell walls. Both of them also have cell membrane. While for the cytoplasm, both din na meron sila. Anong difference nila? Again, your fungi are eukaryotes, meaning they have a true nuclei, unlike with the bacterial cell, which only contains a DNA. And your last phase is your dimorphic phase. So from the name itself, di meaning two, because it demonstrates both the mold and the yeast phase. Examples of dimorphic fungi are your Blastomyces dermatitidis, Coccidioides immitis, your Histoplasma capsulatum, and your Paracoccidioides brasiliensis, which we'll be talking about them later on. Now, your fungi have your microscopic units, which you call your hyphae. Your hyphae consists of branching cylindric tubules, and it has two different types. You have your septate hyphae and your aseptate hyphae. So, for septate hyphae, they contain cross walls. So, kung idodrawing natin siya, it would look like para siyang tubules na mahaba, tapos meron siyang nuclei. Take note na meron siyang cross walls. So, may hati yung bawat tubules. Unlike with your aseptate hyphae, which is also known as your coenacetic, these are continuous branches. So, kung idodrawing natin siya, meaning continuous. Notice that there are no cross walls between them. So, yun yung aseptate hyphae. So, a better representation would be this one. This is your septate hyphae. Notice na meron siyang mga cross walls. Unlike with your coenacetic hyphae, nakita nyo na tuloy-tuloy lang siya. Continuous lang siyang nag-flow or nag-grow. And then you also have what you call your pseudo hyphae. Pseudo meaning fake. Bakit siya fake? Kasi na-fake kayo whether it is a septate hyphae, kasi may makikita kayo mga walls sa kanya. But there are also parts na wala siyang cross walls, which is considered also as coenocytic. So that's what you call your pseudo hyphae. Example of a best demonstration for the pseudo hyphae is your yeast cells. Now, a colony of molds is what you call your mycelium. This is a mass of intertwined hyphae. So, pag pinagsama-sama nyo na yung hyphae na yun, na-form nyo na yung mycelium. It has two parts. You have your thallus, which is the vegetative portion, and the aerial part, which is the reproductive portion. Your conidia is a asexual reproductive structures produced either in single or in multiple in long chains or clusters by a specialized hyphae. You have several conidias and we'll be discussing them one by one. So first one, your macroconidia. Your macroconidia could be seen on sample letter E. Makikita nyo naman, macroconidium, from the name itself, macro, meaning large. So makikita nyo naman, formation ng conidia niya, malaki. And then, you also have your microconidium or microconidia. So from the name itself, micro meaning small. So compare nyo naman yung macroconidium nyo sa microconidium. So madaling i-distinguish. Next, you have your orthoconidia on your sample C. Your orthoconidia naman, they are fragmentations of mycelium. So from a long branching or long clusters, nagbe-break siya into fragments. Next, you have your blastoconidia. Your blastoconidia, on the other hand, these are budding process. And your chlamydoconidia are thick-walled, meaning rounding up. Example is on your letter F. Ito, nag-round up yung dulo ng conidia nila. Parang club shape. And then, lastly, you have your sporangiospores. So, from the name itself, sporangio, meaning it forms your sacs terminally on the conidia, which contains your spores. Next, you also have your terms perfect fungi and your imperfect fungi. Your perfect fungi is also known as your teleomorph, while your imperfect fungi are also known as your anamorph. Dahil perfect sila kasi they are capable of both the asexual and the sexual reproduction. Kaya niya din yung meiosis. And examples of perfect fungi are your ABZ. Those are your Ascomycota, Basidiomycota, and Zygomycota. Next, while your imperfect fungi, hindi siya perfect kasi may kulang sa kanya. Ano yung kulang sa kanya? Kulang siya ng sexual reproduction. Ano lang yung kaya niya? Yung asexual reproduction. And, take note, wala ring meiosis na nagaganap sa kanya. Kaya siya hindi perfect. Example of this one is your Deuteromycota. Another tip for mycology, use terms like this para mas madaling matandaan. So, puro terms and concepts kasi ang meron sa mycology and Viro. So, only one way to remember them all easily is through the use of shortcuts. So, dito, sa perfect, ABZ. Sa imperfect, hindi siya perfect kasi kulang siya ng sexual reproduction. So, unahin natin yung mga perfect fungi. First one, you have your Ascomycota. These are your sac fungi, and they have what you call your ascus. Examples of Ascomycota are your Coccidioides, Blastomyces, and your Trichophyton. While for the yeast phase, you have your Saccharomyces and your Candida species. For Basidiomycota, these are known as the club fungi. So, meaning yung dulo, club ba yan? Parang club shape yung characteristics niya. And it's what you call your basidium. Examples of this one are your mushrooms and your Cryptococcus species. For Zygomycota, these are microscopic pin fungi. Microscopic pin daw kasi nakikita niyo yung picture sa baba. 'Di ba ang itsura ng safety pin pag ganyan, 'di ba may bilog dito tapos dito yung patusok. So para daw siyang microscopic pin. Hindi ko alam bakit na-imagine ng mga scientists yan. Kamukha niya daw yan. So anyways, examples of Zygomycota are your Rhizopus, your Mucor, and your Cunningham-ella. And your Deuteromycota is the only imperfect fungi. Examples of this one is the Epidermophyton, Candida also, and Pneumocystis carinii or Pneumocystis girovechi. Now, we go now to the first classification of mycoses, which is your superficial mycoses. So, we'll just run down each classification fast. Kasi alam ko naman na take nyo na siya nung lower years nyo. So, we only have 4 superficial mycoses. First one is the Malassezia furfur, the most favorite. Kasi, anong pinaka-known characteristics kay Malassezia furfur? Yun yung spaghetti and meatball appearance. So, ewan ko din kung bakit siya naging spaghetti and meatball appearance. Kasi ako, personally, mas na-imagine ko siya as bowling pin or pop bottle appearance. Take note, nung nag-boards ako, ang lumabas sa mga exams is instead na spaghetti and meatball appearance, ito, si bowling pin or pop bottle appearance. Pag nakita nyo yan, ang sagot agad si Malassezia furfur. Ayun o, mukha siyang bowling pin. Baligtad na bowling pin. And then, the causative agent for this one, it is the causative agent of Pityriasis versicolor. And take note also, it fluoresces under the wood's light and it grows through the SDA with olive oil. So, tatandaan niyo yung olive oil kay Malassezia furfur. Next, you have your Exophiala wernicki or Hortea wernicki. Take note that some of the scientific names for mycology and virology, nagbabago sila over time. So, always keep yourself updated with the new scientific names of them. Okay? So, your Exophiala wernicki is the causative agent of the disease Tinea nigra. So, tatandaan nyo, Exophiala wernicki nigra, maitim. Kasi sa agar, maitim siya. Next, your Trichosporon bay jelly. Your Trichosporon bay jelly is the causative agent of white piedra. White piedra. Usually, nakikita siya sa hair and skin. White. Beige jelly, beige. So, malapit siya sa color na white. Ayan. Next, you have your Pedraea horte, which is the causative agent of black piedra. So, black version siya ni Trichosporon beige jelly. Next, we go to your second classification of mycoses, which is the cutaneous mycoses. You only have 3: Microsporum species, Trichophyton species, and Epidermophyton species. Aside from that, i-run down ko lang din yung mga tinea infections. Ito, tatandaan sila kasi ito yung madalas na minimension sa mycology part. So, you have your Tinea pedis, Tinea unguium, Tinea curis, Tinea corporis, Tinea capitis, and Tinea barbae. And then, take note also yung mga infection parts nila. And, ano yung mga causative agents nila. I made a summary of this one. So, for pedis, unguium, and curis, the causative agents are the Trichophyton species and the Epidermophyton species. While for the corporis, the capitis, and the barbae have the causative agents of Trichophyton and Microsporum. Tatandaan, ha? So, this one is the Tinea capitis. The Tinea unguium, or also known as onychiomycosis, tatandaan din po itong term na ito. And then your corporis, which is in the skin, and pedis sa foot. And then aside from that, these 3 cutaneous mycoses have a characteristics of the micro and the macroconidia. Take note na si Microsporum, dahil Microsporum siya, konti lang yung micro niya. Pero, madami siyang macroconidia. Baligtad, no? Kasi, ang name niya, Microsporum, pero ang increase sa kanya si macroconidia. Kapag Trichophyton species naman, Trichophyton species, ang madami sa kanya is the Microconidia. While the Epidermophyton, ang madami lang sa kanya si Macroconidia. Pero, wala siyang Microconidia. So, ako kasi, for reviewing ng Myco Viro, gumagawa kong tables na to. Kasi there's no other way for you to memorize kung hindi mag-visualize ng mga tables. So, kayo, if you have your own way, go ahead. Next, your Microsporum species, you have 3 clinically important species. You have your Microsporum odoini, Microsporum canis, and your Microsporum gypsum. Now, anong tatandaan kay Microsporum species? Whether they fluoresce on the wood slide or not. Take note that si odoini and si canis, they fluoresce on the wood slide. While si gypsum, hindi. Yun lang tatandaan nyo dito. Next, your Trichophyton species, you have 3 important species under it. You have your Trichophyton mentagrophytes, rubrum, and your tonsurans. Ano ang tatandaan sa kanila? Yung shape, yung hair baiting test, and other significant characteristics. For the shape, si mentagrophytes, ang shape niya grape-like. Bilog-bilog siya. For Trichophyton rubrum, they are like teardrop. Hindi ako marunong mag-drawing. Sorry, guys. Ayan, teardrop. And then for Trichophyton tonsurans, they are balloon shape. So, para silang oval. Ayan. And then, your hair baiting test, tatandaan nyo, si rubrum tsaka si tonsurans, negative sila. Si mentagrophytes lang yung positive. Paano ko natandaan na positive si mentagrophytes sa hair baiting test? Mentagrophytes. Yung letter T dun sa menta, nilalagyan ko ng ganun. Meaning, positive siya ng hair baiting test. Aside from that, di ba dalawa yung letter T niya? Mentagrophytes. Kasi positive din siya ng urease. And then next, Trichophyton rubrum. Ano yung meaning ng rubrum? It's ruby, meaning kulay red. It's cherry red on a cornmeal agar. And then Trichophyton tonsurans, it starts with letter T kasi it requires thiamine to grow. Okay? Tatandaan yan. Next, itong trichophyton species na to, hindi ko alam sa inyo, but I just discovered this one during the review center na. So, nalaman ko lang siya nung nagmo-mock exams na kami. Kasi never ko siya na-encounter nung lower years ko. Your Trichophyton shollanei causes favus or a hair infection. Aside from that, it has a favic chandelier hyphae. Ano ang itsura ng favic chandelier hyphae? Yung chandelier, pang napagsabi ko. Ayan, mukha siyang baligtad na chandelier. Okay? And then, sa shollanei, usually it occurs on the hair part nga daw. So, tatandaan to, okay? Next, you also have your Trichophyton verrucosum. Your Trichophyton verrucosum requires thiamine and inositol for growth. And it has a characteristic of rat tail or string bean shaped macroconidia. So, malalaki, macroconidia. Rat tail. Rat tail kasi, ang itsura kasi ng buntot ng rat, pag zoom in nyo siya, hindi lang siya kabud na straight na ganyan. May mga lines kasi yung buntot ng rat. So, mukha daw siyang rat tail. Tapos, string beans, yung string bean, yun yung sitaw. Diba kapag inopen nyo yung sitaw, anong laman niya yung mga seeds niya? Eh, diba yung seeds niya naka-line up na parang ganun. Kaya daw mukha siyang rat tail and string beans. And then next, aside from dun sa Trichophyton shollanei, si Epidermophyton flocosum, na-discover ko lang din siya nung nagre-review na ako for boards. Your Epidermophyton flocosum has a characteristic of Dutch pants fusu. I don't know. Sorry. Huwag niyo kabash. Hindi ko alam yung proper pronunciation for this one. It's a club-shaped macroconidia. Yung tinutukoy niya yung Dutch pants, ito yung parang pants ni Aladdin. Sinabi to sa akin sa boards. Kasi kung hindi mo nga naman alam yung meaning ng Dutch pants, ano nga naman yung itsura? So, ito daw, yung pants daw ni Aladdin. Kasi nga naman, club shape siya. Okay?